everybody. I am going to be doing a tutorial now on Cavalry and also some spreadsheet stuff. We're going to cover kind of a bunch of different topics. I've tried to record this tutorial once already in pieces and it ended up being about 2 hours long, so I'm going to try and do it a bit quicker. Shave off some of the nonsense, and if that goes well you'll see this version. If it doesn't, you'll see the other version. If you haven't used Cavalry before, I'll try and talk you through step by step, but I'm not going to get too basic with everything, just in the interest of keeping kind of speed going. So I'd recommend maybe, going and doing just some tutorials about, what's what and what's where, just some basic Cavalry stuff, so you understand some of the concepts I'm talking about, because it can get kind of a lot of connections happening quite quickly, and so it would help if you kind of had a base understanding of how we do kind of basic stuff in Cavalry. Can't recommend their own channel for this enough, so do some tutorials by Chris and Ian and you'll get up to speed in no time. A little bit about me. I am Dominic. I'm a motion designer from the UK. You may have come across my stuff on Instagram. You may have seen it on the Cavalry stories. Occasionally I'm lucky enough to get a little feature there, so you can check me out on Instagram at Positronic Man. And there's a lot of kind of Cavalry experiments there, and some very awkward interviews and talking to camera stuff. And sometimes I break down what I've done there, but again, send me a message if you want to know how anything's done. I'm happy to have a chat with anyone. I run a little studio in Manchester called Positronic with Matthew Lee, who does kind of VJ stuff, and we do a lot of large events and 3D visualizations and raves and festivals and things like that, like large format screens. And we've used Cavalry a hell of a lot in the past to kind of help us get jobs done quickly, get them done on budget, and get them done at the right size format, because Cavalry has the benefit of being able to render in kind of vector, so we can scale stuff up as much as we want and not kind of have to worry about working at huge preview resolutions, which is good. The reason I kind of use Cavalry as much as I do is because I worked at Mainframe Mainframe North, when they were doing the really early stages of Cavalry. So it was kind of like pre-release. I came in to do motion design for those guys and was lucky enough to kind of be allowed to play with the very early test versions of it, and do guinea pig stuff and just see what I could make with it, which was a lot of fun. And then ever since then, I've kind of, when I left Mainframe but kept using Cavalry and trying to take it into all the agencies I worked at subsequently. I worked at, where did I work? I worked at Mainframe, and then I moved over to the Hut Group doing kind of e-commerce stuff, and there was a lot that we could have done with Cavalry there, with aspect and social exports. And then I moved to Revenant. These guys there, they did Oakley and this Valorant trailer, really cool kind of studio, making game trailers and things like that. And then I went on, I did a bunch of freelance work, and you can check some of that out on my Behance if you just type in Dominic Brooks. You'll be able to pull up all kinds of things, and there's usually a little bit of Cavalry in everything. One of the bigger jobs I did in Cavalry was this Creepbox feature film, and I had it was really fun to jump onto this. I got asked by Patrick, who directed the film, to come on board and help with their short that they did, and I used Cavalry for that, and we put it into all of these devices and did a bunch of like kind of tests and stuff like that, and it worked really well, and they got greenlit for a kind of feature film. And we then built some kind of screen graphics for like near future. You see a little Korg Volca there. We built screen graphics for all of those things in Cavalry, kind of infinite variations of stuff, and we built some of this was done in Cinema 4D just to get these kind of 3D shapes, but then it was brought into Cavalry and we modulated it that way. So I've been using Cavalry quite a bit. I've used it for a lot of different things. I do a lot of boring stuff with spreadsheets, formatting spreadsheets nicely for clients, and then using information they put in, data, copy to then drive animations, so I don't have to keep updating, you know, email chains and stuff. They can just update it and it flows into the composition and I just click render. So that's kind of what we're going to do. What we're going to be building is this, and it's based off of this spreadsheet here. You know, you can see we've just got a bunch of stuff here, and it will make sense when we start going through it. I've kind of formatted this in a way that means we can collapse stuff and look as we want to go through looking at it. And this is what we're going to build. We're going to build this. And there's a couple of different things going on here. Most of it's running from or stemming from these base values, and then it feeds into everything else. So these numbers here are controlled by how big these circles are, these bars, how large these circles are as well. These connection lines, if there's connection lines here, it counts them and gives us a number here. And if there is a connection, it says it's active, but if there isn't any, it will say fail and it will turn those boxes off. Things like that. And it's all interconnected, so we don't have to keyframe too much. I mean, there is some keyframing with animating things on at certain times when we want to. We could automate that, and we could do it with time markers and things like that, but maybe we'll save that for another tutorial if we kind of want to show something like as specific as that, because it doesn't have too many use cases. So let's jump right in. As I say, I've already done this once and it took quite a while for me to get everything out, so I think I understand better of the key points we want to get across. Again, I'm not going to go into all of the user interface too much. Please go and look at something like another tutorial. I'll probably put a link to maybe something that can help you out with that at the bottom. So the first thing we're going to want to do is build those radials, and we're going to base them off of our input values in the spreadsheet, and then we're going to use this higher and lower function here to then say if we want to animate those circles bigger or smaller. So we're going to hold down our Option key or Alt key, and we're going to click on the circle. It's going to give us an ellipse. And you see here we get all of the position, rotation is not going to do too much, and scale in here, and opacity. We don't need to worry too much about those now. At the moment, we are just looking at radius. So we're going to want to grab the width, drag it onto the height. Anything that turns blue in Cavalry, you can drag a connection from. And then as soon as we've made that connection, you'll see we get a purple for outgoing and a yellow for incoming. So that just means as we change those, they're going to move together. Now, you don't have to link those, but it does just kind of make things a little bit easier moving forward, because we only need to link one connection into that number in order to make a perfect circle. So we want to take those base values and we want to bring them into Cavalry. And the way we do that is with a sheet. So one shortcut I will tell you is if you want to bring up that little menu down there that I've just brought up, it is Command and full stop, or Control full stop if you're on Windows. I'm using Mac currently. So just try and, if I say Command or Option, just, Command or Alt, just swap it for Control if you're on Windows. And we want to type in sheet here, and it's going to give us a spreadsheet node. Now, it's not the most exciting thing, but it is quite powerful. So if we come in here and we go to our assets, I've got a spreadsheet here. Now, to load a spreadsheet, super duper easy. You go right click in here, import Google Sheet. It's going to give you a little URL here. So you can use a sheet or an Excel or whatever. It doesn't have to be online, but it just makes it easier if it is online. And then we want to go share. You need to make sure that your copy settings, and it does say in here, the Google Sheet share settings must be anyone with the link. So obviously don't share that around if there's private data in, because it has to be publicly accessible. So now we've got our spreadsheet in, we can come here and we can drop it in to our spreadsheet node. First thing we want to change is this column title. And you can see here, the way Cavalry looks at spreadsheets is basically your top row is going to be your column title, and then the cell directly underneath that is going to be values, the first value, which Cavalry takes is 0. So it always counts 0, 1, 2, 3. There's always a 0 as the first index number. So we want to come in here and we want to grab our base values, because that's what we want to be grabbing out of here. So if we drag this directly into the ellipse shape and put it into the width and then check it, it's going to say 250. And you can see here the first value on base value is 250. And that's great. That's exactly what we wanted. But we want to be able to control that 250. Now, currently, with nothing in between this spreadsheet and this ellipse shape, we have no way really of modulating that data. We don't have any way to animate that data. So we don't want to go straight in to the width. So let's disconnect this. If you click on your incoming connection on this radius width, and you can just cross this off. So now those aren't going to be linked. What we want to do is add something in between those that we can control, and we're going to add in a value node. And we're going to call this base values. And we're going to drop our spreadsheet into there, and we're going to drag our spreadsheet value into there. So now if we go on the value, we'll see that it's giving us a value of 250. And now we can drop that in on the width. Now what value allows you to do is, oh, sorry, I put this into strength. We don't want to put it into strength. You want to grab your spreadsheet and put it into value. Apologies. And then go 100. And now we're getting a value of 250 on the width of that ellipse. And what the value allows us to do, it allows us to scale. It allows us to take values of a percentage and kind of scale it in and out. There. And that's what we want to do. We want to take that ellipse and we want to be able to animate it on, and we want to then change its values based on a higher lower function that we've got over there. But in order to change the value, we're going to need to add a secondary value in order to switch from this base value to go to the higher or lower value. So we're going to need a second value. So let's duplicate the value that we have here, and let's call this higher lower value. Wonderful. So now we've got higher lower value, but we don't want that to be the base value. So let's cross that off, because we don't necessarily want that right now. What we want is for Cavalry to look at this spreadsheet and say, does this say higher or does it say lower? And if it says higher, I'm going to give us a higher value. And if it says lower, I'm going to give a lower value to those radiuses. So you can see here what I've got is higher, lower here. And if I change this to higher, it changes this number to 1. We can do this in Cavalry, but I find sometimes it's easier to do things in the spreadsheet than it is to do in Cavalry. So all I've done in this spreadsheet is add a little expression that basically says if that cell, which in my case is E2, if E2 equals the string value of higher, if it contains the word higher, give us a value of 1. And if it contains anything else, give us a value of 0. And that's exactly what it's doing. So now we can take these values and use the 0 and 1 to get Cavalry to do binary sorting for us. We can essentially say, 1 is yes and 0 is no. So we can then use something in Cavalry called an if-else kind of behavioral statement. So if we come in here and type if-else, we're going to get this little if-else here. Now it expects a condition and expects 2 values. So we determine ourselves the values, and we know in this case we want higher values and we want lower values. So we're going to put some values into here in a second, but it also needs a condition, and our condition is this Cavalry driver. It's 0 or 1 for yes and no. So let's add in, we can just duplicate our spreadsheet again. We'll drop it in the IfElse and we'll say come in here, and we want it to be the condition. And we don't want the base value column because that contains a bunch of information that's not going to help us. We want our Cavalry driver. In fact, let's just clean this up a bit and call it if-else condition. There we go. And then if I come here, I have made myself a little UI window to reload spreadsheets because I do it so often that I made this. I can make this available to people. So if I drop my sheet into here, click reload, it reloads the sheet, and we should see that this column title name has now changed and it's updated to match our spreadsheet. Okay, great. So now we've got our condition telling us if the spreadsheet says 0, it's false, and if it says 1, it's true. So now we need to put these in. And we've got 5 values, okay? So we're going to need to make 5 values for it to go higher or lower to, because we are going to duplicate this. In fact, I'll tell you what, we'll do that first. We'll duplicate the shape and come back to the if-else. So because we know we want to duplicate this shape, we're going to come in here and make it an outline. And let's just change the background so it's black. So there's 3 little dots here, kind of 3 little hamburger menu with sliders on it. If you click that, you'll get kind of your composition settings. And if you go to background, click on the color swatch, you can just turn that all the way down. So we've got our ellipse shape, and we know we want 5 because the spreadsheet calls for 5 values. So let's select our ellipse and then go up here to these 9 little dots and create a duplicator. And it will automatically put our circles in there. And you can see already that these are differing sizes because each individual duplicate is pulling a different value until there's no more values to pull. So you'll see that the duplicator, we should be getting 9, but we're only seeing 5, and it's because we've only got 5 values here. So it's already sorting something out for us. But we don't want a grid array. We want them all to emanate from the same point. So we're going to use a point distribution, which is going to put every single one of those in exactly the same place. When you change it to point, it changes the count, and we want our count to be 5. So we can select that manually, and we'll get 5. But there's a better way we can do this in case the spreadsheet changes later. If we come in back to the spreadsheet and look at the base values spreadsheet that we've got, you see here on row count it says 5. And it's because Cavalry knows that underneath this base values and in this base value column, there are inputs in 5 of the cells. Now, if we add in some data across, some of these, let's just kill this. We should, if we reload that sheet, that number should change to 8. There you go. You see it's changed to 8. So now, if this spreadsheet's updated later, if we built it in a way where everything could scale, we'd be able to just update stuff and have duplicators always be the count of the amount of values within the spreadsheet, and it would always update and match the data count. But for now, we won't get into that too much. Let's just reload that sheet again. Oh, if you want to reload the sheet without this, if you right click on your sheet and click reload, it'll reload the sheet for you. Okay, great. We've got our 5 values, and we can see that they're all staggering now. That's great. Okay, so we know that we've got these kind of circles, and they're displaying correctly. We're getting the values here that are being kind of displayed here. And we want to animate these on first. So what we want to do is, in fact, we'll get to animating these later because we'll need to mix these values together before we start animating. Back to our IfElse statement. Let's turn that back on. So we've got IfElse, and we've got the condition going in, and we're pulling in our IfElse condition. And now we need to add these, but we know we've got 5, so we know we need to have 5 values that it can pull from. So we want to add an array. We want to add a value array. So if we right click on the true, we can come in here and we can go add array. An array is just a list of values, and we want to add a value array. And we're going to call this higher. In fact, we'll put values there so we're not getting confused. Higher values. And let's duplicate it and call it lower values. Wunderbar. And we'll drop that in the IfElse statement. And let's add in our lower value here as well. Great, so we've got higher and lower values. And then we want to come in here and we want to have 5 values. And if they're lower, we know we want to have lower values. So let's kind of go lower, 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 lower. We'll tweak these values in a second. And for higher, we want to, again, have 5. And so we add. So that's what we want to do. So now we've basically got a duplicator that's pulling values in, and an IfElse statement that's pulling these different values in, and we can now mix those together. So we want to get our higher, lower value, because that's our other value that we've got, and we want to take IfElse and put that into the value. And you can see here, it's giving us the first value of lower, because essentially it's saying I don't know what's coming in. I've got a 0 coming in as the first thing here, so I'm going to choose from the lower values, which is minus 122, and I'm going to pipe that out of this value node. Okay, great. So we know if we took that and added it onto the base and minus that from the base value, then it would shrink. So we need to mix these together and then pipe it into our ellipse radius. So here's how we do that. We use something called a behavior mixer, and it's got a nice little kind of bowl and stirring icon there, nice and clear. So in our behavior mixer, you can see here that we get an input behavior, and we get kind of a blend mode, and we get a strength. But we need 2. We need 2 inputs, so let's add 1 in, and now we've got 2. So the first thing we want to do is add our base values in. Great. Okay. So if we come in here, let's just get out our base values because we don't want to see it. So now we're just going to get 250 coming in. And let's put our base value into there instead. And it's going to double in size. And the reason it's doing that is because the second value hasn't been established. So if I just turn that to 0, we'll start seeing this. So now we're pulling all of those base values through, and nothing else affects it. So we're back to where we were. And now if we come in and we add our higher lower value into here, nothing happens because at the moment it's got no strength. But if we go up to 100, the first two will shrink down, and then the second three will expand. And there we go. And we can see that that's how that works. Okay, great. So now essentially what we have are two sliders that we can just mess around with and say, well, we want to mix between these one after the other. So let's turn these both down to 0. And what happens is they all disappear, which is what we want because we want to animate them on. So let's go our base value, and let's go 20 frames, and then have that up at 100, and then let's wait, I don't know what, like a couple of frames, and then go here to here, and then change that to there. In fact, we'll see how it goes. Cavalry does something quite nice for us, and it means we don't have to go into the graph editor all the time. I mean, we can. It's not nearly as painful as After Effects, and we could change these curves ourselves if we wanted to, but I find 9 times out of 10, if you just want like a quick, easy win for something looking good, you can come in here, right click, select all the keyframes and right click them, and you get magic easing. It's a bunch of preset curves, and very slow in, very slow out is going to give us a nice easing curve. Now if I go back to the graph editor, you'll see here that we've now got kind of nice curves going. So great. So now if we watch this, they'll all expand, and then given time they'll all change again. That looks nice, but we want to offset these because we want their sequenced animation. Now how do we do that? They're all part of a duplicator. We don't have access to each individual kind of time, and that's because it's controlled in the duplicator, and the duplicator has a function called shape time offset, and essentially that's just how it's like a step effector affecting time in Cinema 4D, or it's essentially like duplicating a bunch of layers and staggering them in After Effects. So if you come in here and you right click shape time offset, you can go into behavior and add in a stagger, and a stagger is going to do exactly what it sounds like. It's going to stagger the way they come on. So let's add some values in here. Let's go 50 and minus 50, because we want to make sure that we're not seeing, we're offsetting the delay. So great, if we come back here, all of that will be gone. If we do this, we're now going to see each one of these pops itself on, and then after a amount of time, they will change down, which is quite nice, considering all we've done is 2 keyframes. So that's an easy win for us. So that looks nice, and that's all working as expected, and it's pulling all of these bits of information in. So what we've covered there is kind of how to use a spreadsheet to dictate base values, and then we can choose, with a little bit of wrangling our end back end in Cavalry, we can allow a client to decide kind of functionality if we want to, because let me show you here, if we change a bunch of these and we go change this to lower, change this to higher, change this to, let's just do kind of alternating, we change that and we reload, you'll see these are all like that now, but if we reload they'll all change because they're all pulling different things. So that's quite fun, and quite powerful as well. And we can change, if we change these base values, that'll all change as well. If we change all the base values to be substantially lower and then make them all go higher, so let's go 20, 10, 70, 100, and then change them all to go higher, we're going to see a bunch of really small circles at the start, and then they'll all expand over time. Let's not drink a one. There you go. So you can see how that will be quite fun. And then we can tweak the values in here, the higher lower values, if we're like, well, that's good, but they're not getting big enough now. Like I really want to kind of get some nice expansion going, so they're not all overlapping with each other. That's obviously quite nice. There you go. And do something like that. So now they'll go from very small, and they'll kind of scale up and all get quite a lot bigger. Very cool. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to drop some points onto these, so we can kind of connect lines to them. Let's call this radial array. In my example, I have more than one radial array. I've got some with a fill underneath. So let's maybe just show you that. If I call this radial radial array outlines, radial array fill. So we can just, we can duplicate this. And the reason I separated this out, I think, is because I had some overlay issues. And sometimes it's just easier to keep things separate. So if we come into our duplicated one, our fill, click on our ellipse shape again and turn off our stroke and turn on our fill, we'll kind of see these things getting filled out. And I added a gradient into mine. So here we could choose a color if we wanted to, and it would just give us a block color. But if we want something a little more interesting, we can come down here and add a shader. And I added a gradient shader for mine. The gradient shader works on top of this color. So if you come into the gradient shader and say, click on one of your stops and then take away the alpha value, it will reveal the original color that you had. So a lot of the time when you're using gradient shaders, you want to make sure you turn your alpha value on these down to 0, so you kind of get the gradient doing what you expect it to do. So we come into the gradient and we go here and we go, great, let's get that kind of lime green color. Obviously it's way too strong for us at the moment. We don't want to see it nearly that much, so let's turn it right down so we're barely getting just a kind of hint of something, and then maybe we'll rotate it just a little bit. There you go, and we'll see it will follow exactly as we were doing it before, and then when it goes up again, we'll kind of see those gradients kind of stacking and revealing over the top of each other and getting stronger. There was one other thing that I did, which was I kind of have lines that are outlined but are slightly larger than the original ones. So the way I did that was by coming in, I duplicate it again, and let's call these radial array outline boosters. There you go. And the way I did that is just by unfurling all of this stuff and just going on the ellipse shape. And if you right click on the radius, the one that's getting our base values mixed with the IfElse, we can come in here and add an expression, and we can kind of add and take away values from this without needing to add more nodes. If we know it's going to be one set value, so we can add, and let's add a value of 20. That's probably a bit too much. Let's add a value of 10. That's nice. And let's change the color so we know that there's two different things happening here, and let's make it thinner, and let's maybe add a dash. Let's change the percentages and go 0.1 and then 0.5 and maybe 0.2. There you go. So now we've got 3 kind of arrays that are doing different things, and then as they change, they're all staying relative to each other. Great. Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll do some color coding, and then we'll group these and draw a line underneath that. And do this. So let's group those. Oop. And call this radial array. Save. Okay, cool. So now we want to drop some shapes, like points, onto each one of these ellipses. So let's make a rectangle. And as before, we're going to link the width to the height and have those sit down, and we're going to make it, I don't know, is 20 good? 20 might be good. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's go 30 just for the sake of being able to see stuff. And let's make it white, and then let's put it in its own group and call it data byte. And then let's make this. Okay, so now we've got 1 byte, and we know we're going to want one of these on each one of these rings. So we're going to use a duplicator again. So select your data byte and then click duplicator, and then you can drop your data byte in there just to keep it clean. And now we don't want a grid, we want a path, because we know we're dealing with kind of paths. So let's select the path distribution here, and it's not going to do anything because it's going to want a path. So we want our radial array outlines, that original one that we did that sits in the middle, and we can drop that into the input shape. Now as default, it's saying per shape or per submesh, which means if we click on here, you'll see it says per submesh, we're going to give it 3. So per ring, we're going to give 3 duplicants. So we can put 1, and then we'll get 1 per submesh, which is nice. but I tend to do it slightly differently. And I found that if you use per contour, it kind of gives you more controllable results if you start rotating things around. So that's what we're going to go with. Let me just swap these back to those original values just because it's better for demonstration purposes. If I reload that, we should get, there you go. Okay, so now what we'll see is as those rings go, we have points that are all sticking nicely to them, which is exactly what we wanted. But we don't like the fact that it's the royal we there. I'm not liking the fact that they're all exactly in a line up, kind of, there's no variation there. So what we're going to do is add some variation. And because these bites are stuck to those meshes, those circles, we don't want to rotate those, because if we rotate those, they'll just rotate in place. What we want to do is we want to rotate the outlines that they're stuck to. So if we double click on our radial array outlines and come into shape rotation and go here and add a behavior in. Now we can add a lot of different behaviors. We could add a noise, we could add a random and click through seeds, but if we want a kind of constant move that travels in, you know, one direction, what we want to do is add a frame. Now a frame is essentially just copying the time. So you'll see here that we've got time, and it says 116, and you'll notice here that time says 116 because these are linked here. They're going down there. So as we play through, you'll see every single frame, it's matching that. So we're getting a unique incremental value for every frame that passes. And so what we'll notice that means for these is that they all rotate around the exact same way, at the exact same speed. Now, that's not very interesting off the bat, but what we can do is kind of keep stacking on that behavior, and we can come into the value and add a behavior within that value. So in this instance, let's use a random. So we want to give the frame a random value between X and Y, and the values that we can use in random are here. So at the moment, that means from 0 to 1. So they're all going to be going, either they'll be static or they'll go round as they were going around before, but we want to add more variation in. So let's add a minus value in, which means we'll get some anti-clockwise motion and some clockwise motion. So minus 2.5 and 2.5 will give us some kind of more interesting results. So as we see them moving around, we'll see now we're kind of getting like a strange orbiting kind of solar system-y kind of vibe going on where they travel in different directions. So there you go, that's quite nice. Great, let's call these data byte. Data bytes. Great. So we've got those, and now in my example we had a shape that created kind of like a boundary around all of these shapes. And it's not hard at all. It's a single node in Cavalry. So let's type it in. It's called Convex Hull. See there, it's typed in. We can just press enter. Now Convex Hull is essentially going to take whatever input shapes you put into it and draw the boundaries around those shapes based on their kind of perimeter vertices. So what we want to do, we want to take our data bytes and drop it into this input shapes thing here. We can also just drag this over. You can pick up the whole thing and drop it into, oh, I thought you could. Never mind. All right. Oh wait, it's because of that. You can pick up the whole thing. I was picking up the wrong thing. Okay, great. And you can see immediately that we've got a shape that kind of goes over the boundaries. Let's put them underneath the data byte so we can actually see what's happening. If I zoom in here, you can see there around each one of these edges, we've got kind of like a perfect boundary. Great, so we don't want it to be filled because we kind of want a nice outline. So let's turn off the fill and turn on the stroke and give it a, I think I had it as like a pink color. But you can see here if we zoom right in, or in fact if I make the stroke a bit wider, it's on the middle and it's kind of intersecting with those shapes, which isn't exactly the best look. But we've got a function for that down here. We've got the alignment, so we can choose it to be center, we can choose it to be inside of that line, or we can choose it to be outside. And in this instance, we want it to be outside the line. And then we want to do something like this. There you go. So now we have boundaries going around the shape, kind of no matter what happens with them, they'll all be, I don't know why that's shooting off over there. What? Oh, I tell you what, it's probably because I haven't animated those up. So let's go into the data bytes and go in here, and on this rectangle shape, let's do this and go value of 0 and then value of 25 or whatever we shape time offset on those, but let's use the same shape time offset that we had for inside of here. We'll drag the shape time offset onto the data byte shape time offset, which is up here. Again, I'm not exactly sure why that's doing that. It wasn't doing it before. Huh. Alright, sweet. So we've done our circles, we've done our kind of convex hull. Again, I don't know why it's doing this, because in my example, in here, it doesn't do that. I'm sure it's something I've done and not the fault of Cavalry. If I find out what it is while we're doing this, I'll let you guys know. Okay, so now we're going to do our titles. We've done one, but we need it obviously in a duplication, so they're typing on, so that's good. So we're going to select it and then drop it into a duplicator again, and we want 5 in the X and 1 in the Y. And let's scrooch it up a bit, and let's find out maybe how wide this gets. And let's move it so it's kind of in the middle. And we'll make this nice and wide, so it's, there you go, that's pretty nice. Okay, cool, so we've got these coming on, but once again we need these to be staggered, so let's just add another stagger. So shape time offset, behavior and stagger. Once again we'll drop it inside the duplicator, and let's go 50 and minus 50, just so we kind of have it starting at the 0 frame. Oh, but it's going backwards. So if we come into the stagger, you see we've got a little graph tab here, and it basically just is the direction of stagger. So if we swap that around and invert it, and sorry, there's a little kind of mirror switch here. You can go vertical or you can go horizontal. So there we go, and we've got these now. Okay, so that's very nice. But now we want to connect these dots to these bits up here. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can either make, if we try and connect this submesh directly to these submeshes, all of these letters are going to be kind of included within the submesh. I'm sure there's a clever way to stop it from doing that, but for the purposes of this, we don't really need to worry too much about it. What we can do is call this, let's call this text, and we'll do another one, and we'll call them source points. We'll just make a cube again and make it a bit smaller, and just link the width and height. So we've got 2020, and we'll drop that into a duplicator as well. Now we kind of just want to copy the title, the way that it's kind of laid out. So let's take the position and drag it onto the second duplicator and drop it into position, and then let's take the count and we'll drop it into the duplicator, and we do grid count, and then that should be kind of aligning nicely. If we then, oh, and then we want to go size as well, of course. So let's get our text and let's go size, and then drop that into grid size. So now you can see we're getting a load of these things drop down quite nicely there, but it's slightly skewed. It's not exactly what we want, so we can kind of get around that. There's a couple of ways to do that, but if we just group our cube and then drop that back into, replace our input shape, and we'll have to make the group not visible and then the cube visible. But now this allows us to come in here and access our cube transforms, so we can just come in here and drop that kind of, we can position that how we want. And basically all this means is we've just got a nice clean submesh to connect, so that only has 5 points contained within it, and it'll look quite nice kind of separated. So what we're going to do, we'll call this source, and we'll call these titles, sorry. Great, and so we want to connect these data bytes to the source, so we'll do that with a connect shape. And the way connect shape work is you can pick a bunch of different inputs here, and it will create shapes that you can't see. So if it kind of comes in default on circle, and you can see there's 3 points, and if we increase that point count, it starts giving us these kind of geometry, sacred geometry kind of styles, and we could change the target to, I don't know, let's go random, and you see we're going to get like kind of these pretty cool results just kind of out of the box. But we want something a little more controlled and kind of specific, and so we want to select submesh because we want to take our meshes contained within another mesh. So let's grab our source and drop it into source. And then on target, we want to grab our data bytes because that's what we want to connect to. So straight away, let me just change these to a color that is easily visible and make these a little bit thinner. Straight away, we can see we're getting all of those points and they're connecting to the data points. It's not quite what we wanted. There's too many, and they're not doing the nice bend that I had in this. You can see they kind of got a beveled edge, and they're angled. So let's create the single lines first because it'd be easiest to see. And the way we do that is with mode. At the moment, it's kind of just connecting to quite a lot of them, which we don't want. If we went within range, it would connect to them only when they came within a certain range, which makes quite a nice effect, but we don't want that. We want them connected all the time, but we want 1 to be connected to 1, 5 to be connected to 5. So, and to do that, we do point index. Because it's basically saying this point here has an index of 0, and this point here also has an index of 0. We'll connect those 2 points together. And it gives us this nice result here where we just get 1 connection per point that stays constant the whole way through the animation. So I'm just dropping the connect shapes underneath so it doesn't overlap any of these, so it looks like it's kind of emanating from them. So we'll come into the connect shape now, and to make our nice kind of angled lines, we do this. We go auto, Bezier. And you've got a few options: shoulder target, shoulder source, or shoulder both. In our use case, we want to shoulder both. And it's going to give us these kind of sweeping curved lines, which again, it's a nice effect. There's nothing wrong with that, but we want to kind of stylize it a little bit more. So the way we do that is we're going to add a deformer. So come here, use a little plus, and we want to do resample path, which is going to take the paths and resample the amount of points on them. So it's now, instead of having nice curve paths, it's making linear paths with this, and we can come in here, we can kind of change this, and it will kind of increment down how much it resamples it, or we can do this and it will resample as Bezier. So we can resample as linear, or we can resample as Bezier curves, but we want to do resample as linear. And then now we've done that, let's drop that into the connect shape. Now we've done that, we can come in here and we can start, this isn't the right one, we want to do this, change where the end curve is happening, and it gives us that nice kind of angled edge, which is pretty nice. And then last little thing that we do, we add another deformer, and it's a bevel this time, and there we go, and we get nice little kind of bevels, which is makes kind of nice lines. So now what do we have to do, because they're kind of just on here, which isn't exactly what we want. So let's animate on the source points. So let's do 10 frames, add a keyframe on the size, and then bring this down to 0, and add our magic easing on. And we're going to want these to kind of pop up in the same sequence as the titles. So let's reuse our shape time offset stagger there. And then on the connect shape, we want to add a trim pass. And you might think, well, we'll come into the stroke and we'll do the trim pass here. There's a little thing for trim pass. We'll click it and do this, but we'll see that it's doing them all at the same time, which isn't what we want. We kind of want them to come on as the titles right on. There is a time offset in here, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to do what we want, but let's give it a go. Actually, I hadn't considered that. So let's do our trim pass end down to 0, and then let's come to 30 and do this. There we go. And you can see it's kind of doing one at a time, but it's only connecting them once these shapes appear. So we want to make sure that it's going the right way. Now let's try and add our, where is it? Let's try and add our titles stagger into the shape time offset on the connect shape and see if that actually does what we want. So let's go time offset. It's going the wrong way, is it? Okay, it is going the wrong way. So let's disconnect that. Disconnect that. And let's add it in. Where's stagger? There we go. So let's go 50. Was that 50? Sure, that shouldn't be. Oh, it's because he already had his base value. There we go. And I can do this. And now we'll see but we need to make sure that this isn't animated on straight away. We need to give it some time to appear. Here we go. Oop. Don't like the way that kind of clips on there. I think it's because they're connecting to the, if we do this, there we go. Let's do magic using very slow in and very slow out. And now they all connect nicely. Do the correct things and they will move as they change as well. So when those radials change, we'll see that they all kind of keep touch with them as they shift around and move and give us nice connecting lines. Okay, very nice. Now we need to do our bars. So let's do the bars that kind of sit on top of this. And we're going to drive these from the same numbers we drive the radius of the scales. So let's just connect these and we'll call these titles and connections. There we go. And now we want to create a kind of bar graph effect here. So let's create a background and let's, because we will want to animate these on, but we want them to animate from top to bottom. So let's do that. Let's change this to kind of like a nice green, dark green color, like something like this, just so we can see them. And let's make them kind of thin. Let's group it in case we need to do some transform stuff and then add it into a duplicator. Now we know we need 5 and we know we need 1 in the Y, so let's do that. And then let's boost them apart like this. And let's make those quite long so we can kind of see the effect nicely. Let's do something like that. Okay, that looks nice. But if we scale those, they're going to scale from the middle and we don't want that. So let's go 300 and let's add an align. Now align's up here in the top right hand corner. It's those 2 little bars. And basically what this is going to do is going to allow us to say which, we're shifting the anchor point of the shape. And then let's leave that where it is and move the cube down so the duplicator kind of stays. If we select the duplicator, it's it's in the middle as opposed to the bottom, allowing us to control that. So let's go here and do that. Now, because we've grouped this rectangle, it allows us to put more stuff inside of this rectangle, inside of this group, to kind of stack up, and it'll duplicate everything that we put inside. So let's duplicate this background and call it active bar. Okay, so now we've got something called an active bar, and let's change the color. Let's color pick from an existing color. Let's try that again. There we go. So now you see we've got bars that are here. Okay, great. So let's tell you what we can do, which might be nice. Let's add a little chamfered edge and do this. But we don't want to do all of them. Let's just do them individual. Let's just do the top right. That looks quite nice, doesn't it? So now we've got our bars. We want to make them kind of go up and down as these circles get bigger and smaller. And so the way we do that is by kind of grabbing the values that we've got here and piping them into here. But if we just do that, it's not going to work as expected. So let me just grab the radial array. So we want to come down here and find our behavior mixer. Where did that go? Okay, behavior mixer, and call this base value switch. And if we pipe that, let me just make this bigger. If we pipe our base value switch directly into the active bar height, they're going to go crazy. They're going to extend past the bounds. So it's good, they're doing what we want, but they are extending far past the bounds of the range that is allowed by the bar background. And the way we can get around that is by adding kind of something in between the 2 values, and that thing is a number range. So if we put our behavior mixer into the number range, we're now taking those numbers raw, and what we need to do is find out our minimum maximum for those bar graphs. So we had the height of our bar was 300, was it? So if we come into our number range and say the source minimum maximum, we'll deal with that later, but the maximum we want to be allowed to do here is 300, and the source minimum maximum is 0, and we need to kind of work out what's the total possible amount it can be. And we know that the base values are, let's have a look at the base values. So the biggest amount here on a base value is 300, and that's going to be going lower. So this is 200 and that's going higher. So let's find out kind of what that additional value is. So that's adding 200. So it's about 450. So our max is going to be about 450. So if we put that in there and then take this number range and put it into our height instead, we'll see that now we've mapped these within the range of the bar. Let's call this base value remap. And then we've got a kind of little bar chart that does exactly what we thought it would do. So let's just animate these on ever so quickly, and we'll just do a little kind of flashing animation. Let's go 20, we'll go 1 frame forward, 50, let's go 20, and then 100, and then let's take our titles, connections, shape time offset, and just apply that again into here. Shape time offset, so now we should see they flicker on and then the bar graphs appear afterwards. We can add a little kind of detail into the side of this if we wanted to add kind of measurement lines. There's a few different ways we can do that with duplicators. I mean, if I show you this, if we go basic line, let's drop a basic line into that group, and let's rotate it 90 and make it 300 because we know that's the size of our, is it 300? I thought that would be going well. 300. There we go. Great. And now what we can do is, if we call this baseline, and then add. It's got 10 divisions, so let's say in fact we want 8 divisions, not 80 divisions. Jesus. We want 8 divisions, and then let's duplicate that line. And then go 0 and make it much smaller, like 20 or something, and make that a bit thinner. There we go. And if we group that and then drop that into a duplicator, we're going to start getting a grid. But instead of grid, let's use path, and then let's grab our baseline and bring that into here. There we go. And it's going to start giving us some, put you in there. And let's move that there. 90, and let's move that across here. There we go. And we want we don't want path, sorry, we want shape points. And then we have to drag our baseline back in, but it's going to give us a it should give us a point for each one of these divisions in here, which it's not doing. And why isn't it doing that? Because we've moved this somewhere. Aha, there we go. I knew that should work. Sorry, zeroing things out when I shouldn't have. And now if we move this line just off to the edge here, like this, we're going to get a kind of like little measuring line effect, which is kind of cool. We then have to animate those on, but you know, you can do that using the techniques we've already covered and established. Let me just get rid of these because we don't necessarily need those. Costume changed. We just went to watch a what's that film called? I've just been to watch a film. I've forgotten what its name is. Fievel Goes West, or a Mouse Tale. The little mouse goes to America from Russia. Very good. Nice to see in the cinema. Great animation. You know, in the olden days where they actually did it frame by frame. Okay, back into this, and we're going to build our bottom section. So the way and the things that are included in this down here, and we'll be able to see these pop on. So we've got the disk name, we've got a readout value of the correlating radial, we've got kind of anchor points that are using connect shapes again to some more duplicates. We've then got these numbers here, which are counting how many connections have been made, and if there's connections that have been made, we're going to tell this to say active. So a couple more if-else statements and some color array switching, and then we have another tiny little thing over here. We see these squares are kind of shifting shapes, and that is a blend submesh positions. So let's dive into that. So there's a few different ways we can build that system down at the bottom. We can build it's essentially a duplicator. So we can either have multiple duplicators, each doing one column, or we can do one row and then one duplicator, and that's how I've done it in my composition. So that's how we're going to try and rebuild it here. Okay, so we are going to grab our titles from up here because we know we want the same ones. Okay, let's just group these bar charts off here. Come on. Bar charts. And let's maybe change some of these colors so we're getting some visual indication of what is what. Okay, good. So we don't want a duplicator for this now because we're going to duplicate it later. So let's eliminate the duplicator and just grab our title out here. There we go. Perfect. We can delete that. Now we don't need this group either because we are not going to use the background shape and measure the text. We're going to animate the boxes on that the text sit in first and then bring the text on afterwards. So we're going to take this out of here. We're going to delete that. And if you come back in here, you see now this is all disconnected. So we're going to call this disk title bottom. Great. And we'll zero this out now. In fact, I'll tell you what, no, we'll leave everything at 0 because we're going to build this and we'll get rid of everything else so we can see what's happening. So we've got our disk bottom 0. That's lovely stuff. Great. And we're going to want a background for it. So we're going to do this. Now, we need to remember our text is left aligned. And I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're just going to center this off because that font isn't being recognized. It's kind of exactly in the center. So I guess what, -3.5? It's looking healthy. And then let's call this title BG. Right, and let's put it underneath. And we've got to remember, because our text is left aligned, we're going to want our box to be left aligned to kind of get it sitting right. And we also want that because we're going to animate it on from left to right, and we don't want it scaling from the middle again. So now that is in there, we can go onto the align and say, oh, did I put in the wrong thing? I did. Let's put this align into the background. There we go. Okay, so now we can go on the align and scrooge it all the way up to the left, and we can see now that they're lining up. Great, so let's do this and just scale it down and do something like this so they are nicely aligned with one another. Perfect. Okay, and let's constrain this to the box because we know we want the box and the text to always reside within it. So in this box, what I'm going to do, just to show you a slightly different way of doing it, I'm going to add one division in height. If we click on points here, so we'll now see we're getting 1, 2, 3 points in here. And I've done that because we want the central point to constrain against. So if we come into the text now and go position and go add utility, and instead of bounding box constraint, we're going to go component constraint, drop it underneath our title text. And then here you can see we've got point constraint. We can change that to edge constraint. And actually we could use an edge constraint and we wouldn't need to use the division, but I do that just because it comes in as point constraint. And if you change it, you'll see here, if I go add the title background into here and change it to edge, it doesn't carry that over. You have to put in a new thing each time. So just watch out for that. If you think it's not working, all of a sudden it will get rid of that unless you specify the edge and the point constraint. Now, if we click out through the index, we're going to get this binding all of these. And now you can see if we go to the last index on this point, you can see there that it's aligned to this one, which is nice. So now if we move the title box around, the text is going to move with it, which is what we want. So this is coming on, but we want the box to animate on first now. So let's change these colors a bit. Let's make the box the color of the text, and we'll make the text black just for a bit of variety. There we go. Lovely stuff. And then we want to animate this on. So let's animate them on over the same kind of time, and we'll just offset what's happening. Let's go 130 on the box just to make it a nice round number. And let's eke that over there and then do 0, and then trusty very slow in, very slow out. And we'll move the text to follow it slightly on afterwards. There you go. And we've got that. So that's great. We've got our disk name animating in a nice way. So let's just group those together and call that disk name. And now we essentially want to make that again, but just pull in different information. So let's call this disk value, and just we'll do two different colors so we can differentiate quickly which one we're using. Okay, so let's just change that as well. Let's call this disk value bottom, lovely stuff, and value bottom, value BG. Okay, great. So we're going to want to change these background colors, so we know that. So let's make this white and then make this text, that text can stay black. And we can't move this because you see we're getting double transforms because that text is still constrained to that box. So let's grab the box and move the box across. But it would be nice if we could just constrain this box to the other box. So if we move one box, all the boxes move. I should write a Doctor Who style box related story. Right, so let's go into here, add utility, and we can do bounding box or we can do component constraint. I'm trying to think, would there be any drawbacks from using our bounding box? I can't think so, but let's use a component constraint just to kind of keep it all using the same. What the hell happened there? Okay, did I add that to here? Okay, that's not what we were. Oh no, wait, we did want to do that. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Let me just add that back in. Right. Come on. What the? Okay, that's getting that from the BG const. And we want you to be grabbing it from this title background. So we want to bring the other box in to here. There we go. And we want point constraint, and we want it to be on, I guess, number 3. So now we're getting this here, which is nice. And we need to put our box back into our value BG back into the position of this. But where have you gone? Why is it just sitting there? It should be going over there, right? Component constraint value BG1. Why aren't you? Oh, this isn't going anywhere. Component constraint disk value bottom position. Ugh. Sorry guys. I'm trying to do this at speed and making a silly mistake. So let's go here, and then we want to change our index back to 5, and then we'll see that this is kind of aligning up nicely. So, but obviously we can see that that component constraint is edge to edge, and we don't want that. So there's an offset here that we can use, and let's just put in like a nice even. Oh no, we don't want to do that one. We want the component constraint on our value background. So let's go here and let's add 10 in, and we can see that that now moves. And if we move this around, all of that moves relative to it, which is exactly what we want. Okay, but we don't want it to say disk 1, we want it to read the value of the disk. So where's that value? It's in our behavior base value switch, our behavior mixer that we made earlier. So we need to come into the disk value, and because we want to get a value, we need another value. We need another string generator. So we can delete the spreadsheet because it's surplus to requirement here. We can go into our disk value and add in a string generator for a value, and then we can turn the precision and padding down to 0 just so we can be sure that we're getting the correct value when we pipe this in. So grab your behavior mixer and drag it into the number. And if we consult our spreadsheet, the first value is 250, so we can see that that is being brought in correctly. Now, this would be that kind of down to your preference, and if you want to do this, but what I think is nice is if we add some precision to this number, it just means that it's giving us the interpolation values between whole numbers. So when it does move, we kind of see quite nice changing. What would be nice to see actually is if we delay the radial arrays to animate on after these boxes come on, then we'll actually see the benefit of those numbers going up for the first time. There we are, that's quite nice. And then when they move again, it does something like that. Okay, awesome. Let's just save that scene very quickly. So we've got our disk name and we've got our disk value. And now we're going to want to build that connect shapes system that we had. So let's move this over to the left because we know we're going to need a little bit of space. There we go, lovely stuff. And the way that that looked was it's kind of 3 boxes when they're all on, and then a row of 10 by 3. And there's some kind of color variation going on in there as well, which we'll do with an array, a color array. So let's do that. Let's build a rectangle shape and make it, I can't remember what numbers were good here, 20, 20? No, that's going to be way too big. Let's do 10. And again, just connect the width and height because we don't need them to be separate. And we can see that that was that nice green color. So let's come in here and click green, and we'll have a lovely little green box here. That's perfect. Okay, so we've got our rectangle, but we need to also turn that off. In fact, we'll get to that later. We'll just build the duplicate now. Let's just group that and call it single byte. Perfect. And then we'll drop that into a duplicator. And we don't need 3 in the Y. Oh, no, sorry. We do need 3 in the Y. We only want 1 in the X. So let's scrooge that down. I think the value I had was 30. And then we've got kind of our anchor bytes. Let's do that. And considering we've been constraining everything anyway to components, let's do that again. Let's go into our position and add in another component constraint and drop it in here, and we'll go anchor byte const. There we go. And let's get our disk value background and drop it in to the component constraint. Now it's going to drop it on the first one, and I think we're going to need 3. There we are. Oh, sorry, 2. And again, we're going to want to offset that, maybe by double the amount that we've done before, just so we can see there's a general separation. Now we can see that it's being overlapped here. Cavalry does allow you to do kind of what Illustrator After Effects does. You can drag in those marker lines, so we can bring these down so we know we're getting something that actually looks nice. And again, I think it's the same shortcut, so kind of Command and colon, just to bring those up and get rid of them again, in case you were wondering. Okay, so we've got our anchor bytes, great, that's perfect. And then we're going to want the secondary array of kind of target bytes. So let's call these target bytes, lovely stuff. And let's again make these 2 different colors so we know what's going on. Let's drop our, hang on a minute. So what we won't do that, let's drop the single byte into the anchor bytes and then duplicate, which means we'll have 2 separate duplicants to deal with later. And call these target bytes again, target bytes, lovely stuff. And yeah, let's make that a slightly different color, and then add 10 in on the X, and 3 is fine, but we want to change the position of this because we don't want to use the same component constraint. So let's go in here and we'll just delete that. What we want to use is a bounding box constraint, because the amount of vertices in our anchor bytes is going to change when we turn them on and off, so it will flick around. We don't want that. We want it to be constant, so we'll just use the bounding box of the anchor bytes in order to kind of establish its position. So we're going to do that, and we're going to turn it all the way left, and because it's kind of not left, in fact we can do that if we just left align this. We go here and we left align that, it's going to now be all the way, and we'll have it sitting edge to edge. And then we can use our offset here, or yeah, just use our offset here and go 10, but this time we want more space in between so we can see our lovely connect shapes that we're going to make. Doing some action, we'll make it 50. And there was a little bit more size in the X here, I think, so let's go 300. Okay, great. So our target bytes had 2 different, if we go into this other composition, we can see that these target bytes have 2 different duplicates in. There's one with a stroke and there's one with a fill. Again, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. We could do this all in one duplicate, but it will get wouldn't get messy. It was just easier sometimes to just duplicate this. So we've got a single byte, and we'll call this single byte fill, and we'll duplicate it and call it single byte stroke. Lovely. And then if we come into here and we turn off the fill, and we can turn on our stroke and have that stroke be the same. Now we're not seeing anything because we're not piping it into the duplicate yet. So if I go to that single byte stroke and do input shape and go connect a new index, we're going to see every other index is going to give us the value of 1, which is going to give us the stroke. But the stroke's very thick, so let's turn it down to 1, and let's put it to inner, so we know that if we bring back our bounds, they will always sit within those bounds and won't be overlapping and looking messy. Okay, great. So that looks nice, but it's obviously very uniform. So let's add a bit of variation in. By default, auto ID is clicked, which again is just giving 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. We're just alternating between. But if we unclick it, it'll just give us 0, but we can come into shape ID and go add behavior and then add noise. Now what add noise is going to do is going to give us, you know, kind of animated varied amounts of those shape IDs. So if we change this to 0 and 1, because we know we've only got 2 shapes, so we've got 0 to 1 on the index, and we play through, we're just going to see we're going to get some nice variation of the way these are kind of coming on. Now you can use layer as seed, which means if we made duplicates of this, every time there's a new layer, it's going to get a new seed. Again, it's just, we can keep variation without having to constantly update the seed manually. So let's put that into the target bytes, and that's nice. But there was also color variation, but there was only color variation in the ones that were filled. If we look on here again, we'll see that there's only color variance where we have a full rectangle. So the way we do that is we come into the rectangle shape and we'll go to our fill. If we right click on the color, we don't want behavior, we're going to go and add an array. The array is just a list. Same with the value arrays, but we're going to get color swatches instead. So let's add a color array. Right. So if we add 2, because I think we had pink and white there, we'll add a white and then we'll add a pink color. There we are. That's not too bad. And then now you can see we're getting a mixture of those colors, and they will but you can see here, if we, without them all changing, you can see that there's an obvious pattern to the way that they move, and we can again kind of get around that by adding in a noise or a random into the index. So unclick auto index and go here and then go add noise, and you'll straight away see that we've been kind of given something that's a lot more varied. But again, it's given us too much variation. So we have 3 inputs, so it's 0 to 2. And now you probably won't be able to see because they're clicking through, but you can see now that sometimes they're white, sometimes they're pink on the same places, so they change color within the same place. If we used a random, they wouldn't animate through. If we turn timescale off, they'll always be the same color, and they won't kind of animate through. So I tend to like to use noise, because it gives you that choice if you want to animate or if you want to keep it still. I find that that's quite helpful. So, but we'll leave it on 1 for now. Okay, cool. So we've got them looking how we want them to look, and now we need to connect them. So let's use connect shape again. So alt and full stop, and we want to bring in that connect shape, and we're going to build it pretty much the same way we built the other one. Let's call this anchor to target connect, and we're going to go in here again, and we're going to select submesh for both of these, because we want to connect our 2 submeshes from the anchor and the target bytes. So let's drop our target into here, and let's drop our anchor into here. And straight away we can see, if we make these strokes just white and make them nice and thin and drop them underneath, that they're connecting in kind of a nice way. Now let's make this auto bezier again, and we want to shoulder both, so we kind of get them crisscrossing in the middle before they reach over here. And the way I think I did this was, I had this on nearest, but I turned the connection to 2 and 2. So we should get multiple, we should either have 3 or 6 or none. I think there we have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 4. There might be some that we can't see actually, doubling up. Okay, so, and we've done that, and now as they will animate through, we'll see they're connected. The problem we're having is that we always have 3 over here, and we don't always want 3 anchors. We want to be able to animate between having anchors there and not having anchors there. So let's do that by adding in a space in between them, and there's a shape in Cavalry called spacer, and we can drop that in. Straight away you can see we lose connections. So space is doing exactly that. It's adding a space. You can use that in layout shapes as well, to kind of create spaces between layouts. I use them in duplicators and kind of image samplers to make sure that we're not generating loads of geometry that we don't need. So you can do it with visibility as well, I'm pretty sure, but this is kind of like a nice way that you can kind of keep scaling it, and it won't slow you down. Okay, great. So we want to do the same thing that we did with these. We want some variation in how often they're there and how often they're not there. So let's turn on auto ID and go into here, and we'll add another noise in. So we're getting 2 variations, and again, let's just click use layer seed, and it will give us a slightly different value. And let's go -1 and 1. So now, but we can see now that this changes, the bounding box changes. So that's not good. That's not what we want. So we're going to have to use something different to constrain this bounding box to over here. So how do we want to do that? Let's find our bounding box, and it's here. So let's not use these anchor bytes. Let's use this because we know that's going to give us a consistent value. It's not going to change. So let's find our disk value and add our value BG, and it's going to click over to the side because we're losing some space. So I think we knew this gap here was 20, so let's add that back to 70, and then we can see here that we're kind of getting a nice, if we move over here, we'll see that they're always constrained and doing something like that. There we go. Okay, lovely. Target bytes and target and anchor. So let's go byte connections and give it a color. Lovely stuff. And so then we were actually, now we want to count these connections and kind of make an IfElse statement if they are connected. So let's do that. And the way we do that is with count submeshes. So we bring in a count submeshes. We're going to get an input shape, a level mode, and a count. So we want to count the custom, the connect shapes here. So let's drag that in, and straight away it's given us 4. Now I don't want those values, so let's just pin that here because I don't like the way 4 and 2 look in that font. So let's just change how these are connecting. 1 and 1. There we go. Oh no, that's not how we want to do it. Let's go do. 2 and 3. Okay, that's giving us 3 and 6. Okay, lovely. So now we're getting count submeshes. We know it's working because we can see as these change on our screen that there's 6 there, and then there's 3, and then there's 6, and then there's 3. But sometimes we want 0 connections, don't we? So we've got to make sure that that's a possibility in here as well. So let's go here and go. I think the way we do that is not here, but in our anchor bytes noise. And if we go to, yeah, there we go. And now sometimes we'll get given 1, sometimes we'll have 3, sometimes we'll have 6. We can add more variety into that if we wanted to, but I think that looks nice. Okay, so now we need to link that value to a text. So let's bring in a text. Lovely, and let's use our kind of utility folder that we made down here and drag in the industry into the typeface, and let's use slightly, in fact no we won't because we want to make it a slightly different variant of that font. So let's just do industry test and go, in fact we'll just do another one. We'll do this and we'll go demi, so we can reuse that, and we don't want to use book, we want to use demi. And let's drag that into the typeface. Lovely stuff. And because we're going to have a value, we don't need to worry about all caps, but we do need to worry about how big it is, and we do need to worry about its alignment. So let's just go left aligned and centered. Lovely. And it can probably stand to be a bit bigger than that. And we don't want the word Cavalry, we want to draw a value. So let's draw a value with a string generator, and we'll put our count submeshes into the value number of the string generator. And of course we're going to have to turn down the precision because we only ever want to see a whole number for this. Okay, so that's lovely. So now we should be getting, and if I make this, I don't know, more white so we can see what's going on, bring it down here, and let's just shufty this up so we're actually getting the middle of that. There we go. We should see the amount of connections correlates to the amount of the value we see over there, which is nice. Are we ever getting to 0? See, that's not right because we should always see connections being made there. If that is that, I'll tell you why that probably is. It's probably because I've used that layer as a seed. Use position, target bytes, noise, I think it's something about the way I've done this here. Was it with this? No, it was definitely this way. Okay, is that because we were skipping points? There we are, okay. Okay, that's fine. So now we'll always see connections if we see a point there. I still think we could be seeing less. Okay, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Okay, so great. We've got connections that are counting the amount of connections that are being made. So let's call this connection count. Lovely stuff. And but we kind of want to make sure that if we're getting a value of 0, that it's, have we ever seen 0? We we are seeing 0. But we're not getting a lot of 0. Sorry, I'm belaboring this because it's important for this next part. If we're doing this, if I skip that, I swear it was that I had. My problem is I'm pretty sure that I was putting my shape ID into this auto ID instead of into the shape ID. So it wasn't doing what we wanted. It was just giving us it was just changing it from auto to not auto, which isn't what we wanted. Okay, anyway, that's fixed now. So we've got our anchor bytes doing what we wanted, and we can see now that the count is showing that as we expected. So we kind of want to animate these on as they go. So let's do that in a couple of different ways so I can show you how to do that. So on the byte connections, let's go to our anchor bytes. Let's turn off that. Let's turn off that for now and turn off this. So in the anchor bytes, what we're going to do is let's bring them on over time using the noise. We'll animate the noise. So as these as this starts to animate on, and let's go into this disk value here, disk value bottom, value background, and let's just scrooge this over so it happens ever so slightly afterwards. There we go. And we'll close that down. Let's go into our noise now. So as they come on, we want them to appear. So if we animate this to 0.5, that'll be, they're not going to show anything because it'll always be pulling a space. And then by the time they're fully there, let's animate that down. So as they pop on, we'll see those pop on as these slide on from the left-hand side. And that's nice, that's what we want. And then our target bytes, obviously there's a few more of these, so it might not be the best way to just do it with a noise, although we could do it with the noise. But there is a function in this kind of ready-made, and it's called visibility sequence, and it gives us a nice 0 to 100 slider that we can use, which is good if, because we could essentially remap our radial values on, so when they reach their max value, we see all of them, and when we don't reach their max value, we don't see all of them. In fact, that might be a cool thing to do. Okay, so we've got a remap, and we know we've got a remap in this bar chart. So let's go to our active bar, and let's duplicate the base value remap and bring it up here. But this time we know we want the maximum to be 100 because the opacity, the visibility sequencer only goes up to 100. So let's grab the let's grab the remap and put it into the visibility sequences end. So now what we'll see is as those numbers kind of go up, we'll start seeing. Hang on a minute. I'd expect to see all of them there. Is that because that's giving us slightly different values? Maximum would be, yeah, surely 100, right? So that's not giving us a nice remap from, I suppose actually it's taking it from the max possible up, so we'll only ever see a certain amount. So let's maybe bring this down to like maybe half of that value. Let's divide that by 2 and we should start seeing more. We don't see more. Why don't we see more? Bring this right down. Bring it right up. Okay. Okay. That didn't work. Shouldn't try and do things if I'm not sure that they're going to work in the middle of a tutorial. Okay, but now we've got these and we can just animate them on using this visibility sequencer. And so we kind of want to do it maybe just after these have finished animating. So let's go from here and animate from 0 and animate up to 100. And then we'll just see these kind of pop on over time. Now, if we didn't want to see these pop on kind of in like this conformed and that it's quite ordered going up through the duplicator count, we can shuffle these around but keep our grid. So if you come down here and you go to distribution and you come down here and you go shuffle, it's going to keep our grid in the same way that it was. And we could have it a circle, we could have it as anything, and it's going to essentially shuffle where those points are. So now you can see that when we bring this on, they all come on in kind of a much more random way, which is quite nice. So we can use those in conjunction to quite strong effect. But now we should see as those come on, if we turn our connections back on, that as these things animate on and up, we'll start seeing there's connections. Why are they making connections? It's because we're doing the visibility, we're not doing it with spaces. So I'll tell you what we'll do. We won't do that with that in the visibility. We'll do it with the shape ID again. In fact, no, we won't, because it's going to take. No, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll animate these connect shapes on over time as well, and this time we'll just have them all come on at the same time, but we'll do it after these are kind of like appearing. So we'll start it here on the end, and we'll scrooge it down, and we'll go all the way over here like this, and maybe we'll make these very slow out and drag it right across. So now we'll see things do this, and then they start connecting, and they're counting. Okay, that's lovely. So let's come down here, and now we want to put a box around the outside of this if there is active count, and if there's not, we'll take the box away. So let's do this, and let's constrain this to the side of this box. In fact, we're not going to constrain it to that box because it's going to change over time. Oh no, we still get the same bounding box because we're not using different shapes. So let's do that. Let's drop a bounding box constraint in on this. Drop it in. Let's get our byte connections and find our target bytes and drop it into the bounding box constraint. And now if we drag that all the way over to the left, we should see it basically sticking there. So as that moves, that'll all move as well. And let's put this to do. We should be, I think we can just pop the text inside of this box and centralize it. And now that should just move with it anyway. Yeah, no need to constrain it. And let's make the font slightly smaller so it sits nicely within the box. Let's make the box that green color that we've been using, and we'll make the text black so we can see it when it's being cut out. Okay, lovely stuff. There we go. And what we'll do is we'll animate that on over time. So once those reach the fullness of their animation, we'll animate that on. So let's set a keyframe at one end and connect the width to the height. Drag that down a little bit and then put 0 and do our magic easing that we have here. So now we'll see that. Oh, we've got to add a little bit of a offset to that box to make it not overlap. So there we go. And now you can see, there you go. We've got connections, and as they go, they change. But we want to make this so if there's a connection that happens, we want it to invert. We want the text to turn green, and we want the box to disappear, or at least be black. So the way we're going to do that is with IfElse statements and color arrays. So let's make a color array, and we're going to add, and we're going to make one color our green, and one color, in fact, it's just going to have no visibility whatsoever. And we're going to do, let's do the box first. So that we've got a color array, and we're going to put this into our fill color. So, and we want to control the index by using an IfElse statement. So we're going to drop that in here, and let's put it in here. And the condition is going to be the count, this count submeshes here. There we go. We're going to drop that in, and basically we're going to tell it if there's a value of 1. So let's add in a value. If there's a value of 1, give us a value of, if there's, hang on, where's it gone? We don't need a value array, sorry, we just want a single value. Put a value in here. So the true value is anything over 1, and the false value is going to be 0. So let's add another value in here and make this false. So and that's 0. Now I think we need to swap those around. We do, because when it's 0 we want it going the other way. So let's call this false. Ooh, false. Again, come on man. False. True. Okay, great. And let's put the false into the false and the true into the true. There we go. Okie dokie. So there you go. So now when we have a value, it's going to give us the box. But now we essentially need to do the inverse of that for the color of the text as well. So let's make this, and we'll call this box call switch. Lovely stuff. And let's call this text call switch. And all we'll need to do with the text color switch is invert these two here and make the text black. So now we'll be able to connect this to the, we'll be able to connect this connect this to the color of the text. So now when it goes to green, it's a 0 and it counts on and off like that. Okay, so we now have our counter function, lovely stuff. And then we want to add an active false statement, which is essentially what we've done here, but just slightly differently. So let's call this active failed. And we don't need a box for this, so let's take our text out and get rid of our box color switch and get rid of our box. And take out this value because we don't want to see that. We want two different options for this. We want an array, we want a string array, and we want the array to say active and failed, active, and then failed, or just fail actually. Great, so we've got our string array. Oh, did I get rid of our, oh no, we've got this here. There we go, but we don't need it to be in a color array because we're just switching the color of, oh no, yeah, we just want it inside of here, but we want these colors to be slightly different. So we want it active to be green, and then for the one that's not active to be like this. Great, and oh yeah, so we need to do a color switch and a string array switch. So we can bang this in here as well. So the string array index is going to be controlled by the same IfElse statement. And let's move this over here so we can actually see what's happening. And let's make the font slightly smaller because we don't need it that big. So when we get 0, we should turn to fail. There we are. So now let's just arrange that nicely on the side and constrain it to the box that this is contained to. So let's go into here and go position and add a bounding box constraint and go to a counter function and just get this box and put it into the bounding box. So now we should be getting, why is that so far away? So there's our box. I'm not sure why it's so far away. Bounding box constraint. Why are you so far away? Don't need that. I'm not sure. Well, we just push it over here. It's not a big deal. I'm sure it's something I've done. And let's make this bigger so we can actually see what's going on. Okay, so now we've built that, but we've actually got to animate this on. So let's do a text animation on this with a string manipulation, transition string, and we'll do the same thing that we did animate in, and we'll just get rid of this, put it to nothing, and add transition from end and put it to 100. And then once that box is popped on fully, let's click this, go forward, and then animate this down to here. So now we get this, and then we see as they change, we get some nice kind of changing related information. Wonderful. So now we've got all of this. This is essentially our things that we need to duplicate. We can group all of those things. Remember, we can't just move that as a group because we'll start getting some funky results. We'll always need to move this master box over here, and in fact that's what we'll do. We'll bring this out and let's just put this into the group and then just drop it at the bottom of the group and call it master move. So we know that if we want to move it, we've got to move that and not this group. And let's call this performance row. Okay. Ooh, performance row. Great. And now we can drop that into a duplicator. And we know that we need 1 in the X because we only want 1 going across, and we need 5 in the Y. Now, at the moment, it's back to front, and something's gone on here, which isn't good. So we'll have to investigate that. But for now, let's just minus 200, and it's going to give us these things going up here. Now, that is curious as to why that's gone like that. And why has that gone like that? It doesn't look like they're respecting... something's definitely gone on there. Let's investigate together. So it must be something to do with the counter function and this box, and it's this bounding box constraint. They're giving us all different values. Okay, so for now, what we'll do, we'll just delete that. I'm not exactly sure why that's decided it's going to be like that. And let's bring it down here and have this be just over here like this. Now, the reason we're getting different values now, we're seeing that there's kind of something funky happening here, and that's to do with the noise that we've got in the bike connections, or in the bike connections. And if we go to our anchor bytes, if we click here and if we turn position context off, we should see that we're actually getting something, because use position context means this noise is given a different value for every individual position, but we don't want that. So there we go, we can see that that's kind of sorted out some of our problems that we had before. Okay, so let's call this performance duplication. Performance duplication. There we are. So let's kind of, well, we can group that, can't we? We'll call it performance. Again, keep missing the end. What is the matter with me? There we go. Okay, great. So let's add our bar chart back in. Let's add our titles back in. Let's add our bytes and our radial array. Now let's come into the performance, and let's move our master move down so we can actually put this somewhere that looks nice in relation to the composition. We can move that down, but now we don't have that other constraint, so we're going to have to move the other one down as well. So let's take this master move here and grab that counter function and maybe put that into the y. Is that going to mess it up? No. Oop. That's because that's a line to the top, is it? There we go. We can just reposition this for now. It's not a massive deal. Not everything needs to be exactly constrained to each other. So there we go. We can see that we've got this. We need to change those zeros. We've got to animate those on. So let's just pop that text up after we do the box. So that comes on, and let's then just do the same thing with this. Let's turn it off here, and then once they're all on, we'll just go 100, and those boxes will start to count. Okay, cool. So now we've got this, we can do that, and that's lovely, and we can see that these are all kind of counting themselves out and switching when we get a bum value. So the next thing I had was a blend submesh positions thing going on, and that's essentially this, where I've got a bunch of different things going on over here. Let me just show you what that and how I built this. So it's essentially one duplicator that is blending through other duplicator layouts. So let's do that like this. Let's drop a cube in. There we go. And let's just group it and call it byte again, and drop him in a duplicator. And we're going to want to have this on point for now, because we want to dictate. In fact, we might be able to do this a different way. Sorry to experiment when I'm doing a tutorial, but I was thinking about this as I was going to sleep the other night. 5, 5, and let's go here. Okay, so let's call this active, because this is our active one. Active. Oh, in fact, and let's make this just a point, and we'll call this active. And then we're going to go here. Let's turn this off, and we'll call this position 1. Pause 1. Okay, cool. And let's make this. Oh, did I have that one? No, we want 5 and 5, but then we want to give this one a width and height of 0. Okay, so +1. So that's now they'll spread out into a grid from the middle. Okay, and then position 2, let's do this with a shuffle again. So let's just shuffle those, so they should all be slightly differently shuffled. Okay, is there a seed for shuffle? There is a seed for shuffle. And then let's go position 3, and let's just change that to just do up the seed, and then position 4. Wonderful. So now we're going to blend the submesh positions. So let's turn off all of these, because we don't want to see them. We just want to see our active, and let's make it a different color so we can see what's going on. Oh, of course, I need to go into here and grab our rectangle, and let's make it like an orange color so we can see. And then let's add the blend submesh deformer. So if we come into deformer and go blend submesh positions, we're going to go, and we're going to need to give it a name, and let's go start to pass 1, position 1. And it's going to ask us for a destination shape, and we want to put position 1 into there. So as we scrub, nothing happens because we kind of have to animate. But if I scrub this through, we should see that they all start to spread out into position 1. if I do this, if I make these slightly smaller, we'll be able to see what's going on. If I do this into here, and I put our active one to the top, we'll be able to see. There we go. So you can see they're all spreading out into position 1. So we're doing this to that. So let's animate that. So we'll go 0 and go over to 100. And that's nice. And if we play through, we'll see that. But we want these to happen in not all at the same time. So let's go. It's slightly different here. We don't put our time stagger into the active duplicator. We need to put it into this time offset here. So let's add a behavior and let's add a stagger, and let's go 20 and -20. And then we should see, if we look at this, they should all kind of pop out individually and then they spread around. And then all we're going to do is essentially build up from this, and we're going to go start, and then we're going to go pos1 to pos2, and then we're going to add that in to the active one and just put it on top of as a deformer. And now it doesn't look like it moves because they're all in the same position, but if I do this and then we play through, I was worried this would happen because it's because we've got pos1 still in there, so we need to change that to position 2. So hopefully if we play through that, they should swap positions. It's still in pos1. Sorry guys. Replace connection. And then they all change randomly. So if we do that again without making a load of mistakes, position 2 to position 3, and let's drop position 3 into there. Lovely stuff. And replace that connection, and then add this to the chain in active, and then we move the keyframes down a wee bit. We'll then see they'll shuffle themselves around again, which is nice. And then position 3 to position 4, so pos3 to pos4, and then we want to add position 4 into there. Lovely. And then add that to the stack. So add this into the stack. There we go, and if we move the keyframes down, we should see that we get another shuffle, which is cool. And let me just show you kind of what that means we can do. So if we didn't want a grid and we wanted a circle instead, we just need to make sure we kind of have the same amount of submeshes to make this kind of work. So now we'll see that we can just put it into kind of more interesting arrangements if you want. It doesn't just have to be like for like. Just for me, it was, we want to keep a similar structure. Let's put Fibonacci and make sure that there's, I don't know, make sure there's 10. So if we go to here now, we should see that they go into kind of like a crazy sequence and things like that. So we can bring that in. It's just, there's a lot of stuff you can do with that. So let's just keep that as grid and grid for now. Grid. There we go. Okay, that's lovely. And 5, 1. Did I have that as? Yeah, 5, 1. No, 1, 5, sorry. And 1, 5. Okay, great. And so the way I had mine, so we don't need to see this anymore, was I had a lot of these kind of overlapping each other. So let's just make this kind of our green color that we had before so you can see what I did. And then I took this and I blended them over each other with a difference so that when they go over each other they disappear and then reappear. And then I grouped all of these things together and I duplicated it. And I came into this and I made this slightly smaller than the other one. So let's just go, let's do it by half. Do it by half, I made it a different color. There we go. And then I offset that animation ever so slightly like this. So now you'll see we get a kind of nice position swapping animation with lots of kind of little bites doing their thing, which is nice and cool. And we've got to make sure that they're all the same width here. So 373, 373, 373. Lovely. So now they should all kind of do their thing nicely. Yeah, cool. So let's just do that again. Grab this, get the bite, do this, divide by 2, make this, like that, and offset. Lovely. And this is blend submesh. And you can just see here, it's just over into this right-hand side where I had that before. They're all just kind of dotting about, doing their thing, change it ever so slightly, and that's how you do it. You just bring that into there. Okay, so this is where we're at now with everything that we've built. Again, I still haven't worked out what's going on with that convex hull. Sorry, but I probably won't do it when you do it. I'm not sure why mine's doing that. But there's still one more thing we need to do. We need to kind of delay the way that this is coming on. So let's reuse our shape time offset from our titles, and we've got this here. So we can just kind of nicely bring that up here. Oh, we can bring it here, can't we? And shape time offset, and we'll just get a nice kind of stagger on those amounts. So they come on one at a time, which is cool. And there was a couple of other things that I had in my spreadsheet, but they're fairly self-explanatory in that we let me just minimize some of these because we don't need these. And here we have kind of titles and watchwords. In fact, I will go over that now very quickly. I won't rearrange it how I had it. I'll just explain to you what this is and what it's doing. So let's make a title for our composition, and let's bring in a text shape. And great, we're going to want it to be this industry book title. And let's bring in another sheet and load in our spreadsheet that we have here. There we are. And this time we're going to want to use titles because that's what we want. We've got titles. So let's drop that in here and then add it to the string. And you're going to see it's going to give us memory core, which is the first value that we've got here. It says memory core, but we don't want that. Let's use this kind of long one so we can see what it's doing. So let's go down here. Now for this, because we want to specify which one we use, we can use fixed row because we want one value to come out of this at all times. So great, and you can see that text is changing as we're kind of tabbing up through those. So let's do this, make this central, change the font. Let's get, I don't know, let's just make it white for now. And let's move it to the top of our composition. Lovely stuff. And scrooge it down. Scrooge it down, scrooge it down, scrooge it down. Put it here. And then the watchwords is something that you can do, say in a spreadsheet or in Cavalry, to just apply a color or a style. So let's do this and call this just title. And let's do another one and call it watchword. Just duplicate it and call it watch word. There we go. But we don't want to use that titles column. We want to use a column that is watchwords, but we want to make sure the row index is the same. So we will pull internal memory station. That's what we're going to be pulling here. So Cavalry's got a few things you can do. It's not just string manipulators that we can do, but we've also got style behaviors, material behaviors, and formatting inputs. So for now, let's do a style behavior and go apply a typeface. And basically what this means is we are going to, if we click on here, it says we can do specific indices. So let's just build another typeface that we can use for this, and let's make it obvious. Let's make it bold and call this bold. Industry bold. And let's drag that into the apply typeface. Oh, can we not specify that here? Oh, okay, doesn't matter. Industry test, and let's go bold, that's fine. And now you can see here, if we zoom in, that the first and the last have been changed to bold. And let's make this even more obvious. Let's go back in here and go material behavior and go apply material as well. And we'll use the same watchword into, in fact, you'll be able to see here, it's turned these green. Now we don't want to use indices, we want to use something in here that's called regex. No idea how to pronounce that, correct me if you know. And we want to do the same thing here, and then it gives us an input field which we can delete and then use our spreadsheet to drive these things. So if we get the watchword and drive it in here, you'll see it brings in what we wanted, and straight away that's changed. So we can come in here as well and drag that watchword into there, and all of that's going to change. So why is this helpful? Because if we go here and let's just grab our data reloader, and let's come in here, let's change these and just call it, oh, apparently not, memory core telemetry. There we go. And let's change this to memory. We just do the word memory. So now if we come in and reload that, this should all change. Did that that work? Have I not come out of there? Is my little script not working? I haven't dropped the sheet in here. Okay, now this should work. If we do that, all of that should update. There we go. So again, you can see how that's helpful. Client decides they don't like the copy or they want to change it, all the titles. If we want to change disk, let's do that as an example. We want to change disk and let's change it to something else. Let's just call it tray and let's do Roman numerals instead of disk names. So let's do that. I. Ooh, need one more I. And then IV, and then just V. We'll be able to come in here and just reload that again, and all of that will change, which is obviously quite useful for us to do. We don't have to worry about updating loads of font and copy that's hidden away in a comp. We can just know that spreadsheet, and if we set the system up to kind of account for longer strings or shorter strings, that it won't matter if they change the spreadsheet. Okay, cool. Okay, lovely. Well, thanks for watching this. If you watched all of it, managed to get to the end, well done you. Hopefully you learned something. You can let me know if there's any questions. I'll try and get this loaded up onto scenery.io along with this data loader script, so people can use that should they want to. And yeah, send me a message on Instagram if there's anything I can help you with. I'll be happy to go through anything and explain stuff if I've not explained it correctly. Then next time, I've got some things earmarked that I've like cool little bits I've seen on Instagram that people have been making. I want to try and maybe remake something live with you guys, and just you can kind of see how my brain works when I'm approaching a problem in Cavalry. So there'll be a lot of trial and error. And yeah, great. Well, yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll try and upload something again as soon as possible.